everybody. You're listening to the Big Chill Podcast. This is episode 632, Lions and Texans and Bucs. Oh my. Hello, Big Chillians. Welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. I'm Frank, joined as always with Eddie, who looks like he's wearing a Juszczyk designed Niners hat. Is that true? Has that got some glitter on it?
No, not Juszczyk designed. Just this is actually their like fighting cancer, catch cancer theme.
Catch cancer? That was not the slogan.
That wasn't the slogan. No, I don't think it.
Someone gets fired for that one.
Probably. But yes, supporting. I've been wearing it for the last few episodes we've recorded.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
But how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I don't think I won a single bet over the 6 games. I had a collection of like 1 losses or got, 2 of the 3 games right, or did an in-game parlay and had 3 out of the 4 things come true. The only thing I was consistently winning on was my parents and myself would each pick 1 prop bet per game, and we put into like a treble, and we hit that. We did that for Sunday and Monday, and we hit 3 out of the 4 games. So
it's pretty good.
It was like 10 for 50, 10 for 60, but we were like pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And then the one we lost was Tony Pollard total yards. I think he needed 86.5, and he ended with 85. So that was a tough loss.
It's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a difficult weekend of games, obviously, for a few more upsets than we'd expected. I mean, last week in the preview, we said there are always upsets in Wildcard Weekend, and actually underdogs historically do pretty well. And,
we didn't say there's almost always one favorite that wins.
Yeah,
hopefully.
And in the end, it was a rough week for the favorites, and so it was difficult to find winners out there. I mean, I guess if you were just taking the points consistently, you had a really nice weekend. You only, I guess, only had would have lost twice. You would have gone 4-2 if you'd just taken the underdogs with the points. But no, interesting slate of games.
Yeah, I think for me, the killer of the weekend in terms of like bets and just general like what the hell, like mind blown, was the Cowboys. I mean, I think that was the one that screwed me the most.
Yeah, and that's the most surprising. I mean, okay, the manner in which the Texans beat the Browns probably is surprising, but I don't think anyone would have sort of bet their life the Browns were definitely going to win.
Again, if you hadn't told me the last 3 weeks of the regular season, you had said 39-year-old Joe Flacco starting for the Browns, against the nothing-to-lose Texans team. Okay. Maybe everyone got a little caught up in Flacco mania.
Maybe. And then equally, obviously, the Eagles losing. And then maybe the manner in which they lost is also kind of surprising, just basically being blown out. But still, there was reason, they'd lost 4 of their last 5 games of the regular season. There wasn't. It's not that shocking.
For their last 8 against the spread.
Yeah. But then the Cowboys, who appeared to be coming into this game in pretty much top form, okay, against the Packers team that second half of the season looked very good, but still at home, won their last 16 games at home. I think rightfully everyone expected them to kind of handle their business. And for that game to be over a quarter and a half into it, I think that was even the more stunning thing.
Yeah, it was just – so that was actually the only game I watched out, like at a bar. And I unfortunately had to watch at a Packers bar, which at the end of the day I really didn't care so much because, yes, I had – my bets were on the Cowboys, but some of them were prop bets, so I didn't even have the Cowboys winning. So at the end of the day I wasn't super pissed about it. But, that was interesting. I mean, that was just an absolute – ass whooping.
Yeah, I mean, should we go through the games in order?
Yeah, we can.
So if we start with the Browns-Texans game, which started off, I mean, it looked like it was going to be a back and forth contest, And then the Browns just kind of fell off. The back-to-back pick sixes from Joe Flacco kind of killed the game off. If you wanted to be a little bit of a Browns defender, I think you could maybe say that some of the officiating decisions went against them when that game was close, and that maybe had they had the rub of the green on some of those decisions, it sounds crazy to say because they lost by so much in the end, but it could have definitely changed the outcome. I mean, the notable one was they had a definite pass interference where that would have given them a first down, sort of decent field position in terms of getting to like the halfway line, and then in the end had ended up punting.
I have
I
to
don't
say
know.
though, the officiating was just bad overall in that game, and this is what I think we've talked about a few times now that I don't like. It's the just let the players play the game. Don't let the officials change the outcome. But they kind of did that in this game, and it changed the outcome because they were just not making calls. Like, and yes, maybe the Browns had a few more go against their way, but also on the other side, the Texans had a few where you're like, that was clearly pass interference. The guy hit him 3 seconds before the ball. Like, no, we're gonna let him play. Like, no, that's not how you fucking officiate. You just do a good job of officiating, and then you don't affect the outcome of the game because you're officiating with the rules. Like, that was just that officiating in that game was it was not good across the board this weekend, which is a unfortunate theme for the NFL. But that I thought actually was the worst game.
Yeah, no, it probably was the worst, and I do agree with you overall. I don't think there were bad moments from pretty much every game, and that has become a theme this season. So it'll be interesting to see how they can address that going forward, because we really don't want another Super Bowl where one of the talking points is decisions made by the officials, which obviously was a talking point at the end of the Super Bowl last year. But for the Browns, I mean, their defense didn't really cause the Texans any trouble. For
No,
Myles Garrett, not a great look, it has to be
no.
said. He was kind of a non-factor for that entire game. He had one play on a shovel pass where he managed to get into the backfield really quickly, but that was because he was completely unblocked. So, there was not. You kind of came into that game with this standout defense. They were burned time and time again for huge plays, which is what the Texans aim to do. And I guess if kind of using the advantage of hindsight, certainly I felt going into it that this was a nice matchup for the Browns. Maybe the fact that the Texans are so geared for big plays meant that pass rush advantage that the Browns were going to have wasn't as big of a factor. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of players on that Browns team kind of didn't show up. Their entire defense basically failed to make any notable plays. Offensively, I think you can really only blame Flacco because everyone else kind of did okay. It was those backbreaking pick sixes.
God,
I mean,
they were
to
bad.
have back to back, one of which was the first one in particular when he's
Oof.
attempting to find Njoku. It's 1st and 10. They're on the Texans 40, something like that. They kind of started to put a drive together. They were, within touching distance. You did feel like, okay, if they can score a touchdown on this drive, this is a game again.
Yeah, 1st and 10 on Houston's 34.
Yeah. And, he escapes a little bit of pressure. It's a situation where another quarterback probably would have just, who's a bit more agile, probably would have picked up an extra 5-6 yards on the ground, and that would have been the end of that play. Okay, Flacco is not a quarterback built to do that, especially not at this age. Just throw it away. 2nd and 10. It's okay. Instead, he tries to force a throw, like severely underthrows Njoku, and it's game over basically from that point on. And that's the one where you have to look back on and feel like, we got to see the best and worst of Flacco over this time he spent with the Browns, and that was absolutely the worst side of Joe Flacco.
That was hey guys, I had fun playing for you, but don't think for a second I want to come back next year. If you need me to give you incentive to not bring me back, here it is.
I mean, that's the tough thing, right? If you're the Browns, I mean, maybe in a sense, maybe this performance has made it easier because maybe this has quelled some of the talk that Joe Flacco is a definite NFL starter. Maybe this has now put them in a situation where they can sign Flacco as a backup and have that safety and maybe have a bit of a competition between him and Deshaun Watson and see what happens going into the next season. Whereas had he won that game, talk was of him not only being a definite starter with the Browns, but also a potential starter elsewhere. So they might have got themselves into a bit of a bidding war for Flacco's services.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if he wants to come back, and interesting to see exactly who wants him.
Yeah, if Watson wasn't probably preoccupied visiting his old hot spots in Houston during the game, he probably would have been smiling watching that game.
Yeah, he's kind of the only winner of things from the Browns' perspective. Really bad look.
Oh, he's the only one who won on that team on Sunday, I bet.
Yeah, Myles Garrett's the big loser, I think, because in the argument, the constant discussion of him being, one of the greatest players in his position over the last decade, 2 decades, a kind of generational talent, of which I think there's no debating in a sense just how good he can be, but not showing up in the way that he did in a playoff game. When you won't have that many opportunities when you're him, it's not a great look.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I mean, he was going against an okay tackle. It wasn't like he was going up against, like all pro tackle. He was favored in that matchup, and it was interesting because it was a lot of early talk on Myles Garrett. Like, this is a matchup we're going to be interested in. We can't wait to see this matchup. How's Garrett going to do this and that? And then by like the third or fourth quarter, they weren't even like talking about him anymore. Like, there was a point where I thought he was injured because his name just was never spoken. It was, yeah, that was not a great look. But I think overall, I think, we're talking a lot about the Browns, but you got to give the Texans credit, and you have to give CJ Stroud credit. I mean, he's 22 years old, and it didn't even faze him that they were, like a home underdog, pretty much disrespected. No one really thought they had much of a shot. Like, he was calm in the pocket. He was good. He moved around well, good touch on his passes. Like, it was an impressive performance for him. And I think, now what's really nice, I think, is he's got that win under his belt. So no matter what happens next week, this is a very successful season for him and for the Texans. So I think that was a great performance by them. And, between him and Will Anderson Jr., also a rookie, did pretty well. I think this is going to look good for the Texans moving forward. And a great job by Ryans, too. I think this looks really good on Ryans, and in which we're going to talk about in a little bit, I'm sure, in a year where it looks like every coach is on the hot seat. He steps in here and does really well with this team.
Yeah, no, CJ Stroud, arguably the greatest rookie quarterback season of all time. And to, play your first playoff game in your rookie season and to look as composed as he did. Again, if I have any remaining skepticism, there's just this certain element that this team that's so built on this big play approach does lend itself to some occasionally spectacular quarterback performances, right? Because they're willing to just take deep shots down the field really consistently. So, when things do work reasonably well for them, that's obviously going to lead to impressive quarterback performances statistically and from a sort of eye test perspective. But yeah, he's obviously very good. I think, it makes the decision that the Panthers took last season look worse and worse every sort of snap he takes. But I guess, again, my role is to be the negative one, right? I do expect them to lose next week. I think they might come down to earth slightly in that experience. And then part of me thinks, not looking at a sophomore slump necessarily with Stroud, but definitely kind of looking at the talent available on that team. They've definitely overperformed this season, right? So I do feel I'm a little cautious with them that people are suddenly going to start to set expectations of, well, we're going to project growth from the Texans year on year. And the reality is there's a very good chance that next year is a slight step backwards, not because CJ Stroud isn't a very good quarterback, but just because I think everything, for the most part, aside from CJ Stroud being out for a couple of weeks, kind of went their way this season.
Well, Tank Dell has been out the last few weeks too, so their number one receiver didn't even play in this game.
No, yeah, but I just think,
I agree with you. I think Do I think next year, even with a few additions, they are a Super Bowl contender? No. And maybe this comes back to bite me and CJ Stroud just like steps it up to a whole nother level next year. But I think they are a playoff team, a division winner in a division that's not so great. And, maybe they can make it to a championship game next year, but I do not consider them even next year a true Super Bowl contender.
No, I mean, I definitely don't think they will be a Super Bowl contender. I wouldn't even be stunned if next year they didn't make the playoffs. I mean, you say it's not a great division, but, the Colts have shown themselves to be consistently decent. They probably will be competitive next season. And then the question remains, can Jacksonville sort themselves out? But if Jacksonville did manage to make some degree of improvement, then, we have to remember the Texans were not that far away from not even being in the playoffs this season, right? I mean, because they should have probably lost to the Colts based on the position that the Colts got themselves into in that game against the Texans in Week 18. Then you factor in the Jags should have won that division again from the position that they were in with 5 weeks to go. So, they've been a little bit fortunate. So
let me ask you this, Eddie. Let's say Texans next week lose, don't play terrible, but Stroud has an okay game, nothing catastrophic, but they lose to the Ravens. Next year, you're given the option. Do you want CJ Stroud or Trevor Lawrence? Who do you take?
Well, I mean, I would take CJ Stroud right now. I mean, regardless of what happens next, unless you tell me that the Raven, like if one of his arms falls off against the Ravens, I think I'm taking CJ Stroud next season. I think we've seen enough from him. But that is also right. We saw nice things from Trevor Lawrence at times over in his rookie season, and he had a huge playoff comeback last year. Like we do have this recency bias and also the temptation to really love new things over the kind of shiny new object. So, but yeah, I mean, right now I would take CJ Stroud over Trevor Lawrence. If I were the Jags and the Texans called me up and said we want to do a straight swap CJ Stroud for Trevor Lawrence, I don't think I'm not blinking. That's a straight trade for me that I would do in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Okay, so we move on to the next game, which was Chiefs Dolphins, right? That was the night game for Saturday.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many games. Like it literally like it became a blur towards the end.
Yeah, and especially with it ending up
every day was like 8 hours straight of football 3 days in a row.
Well, not Sunday. Well, yeah, I guess we missed just the one game of Sunday. But yeah, the fact that we ended up with 2-2-2 made it feel a little strange. Much.
Like even as Monday kicked in, like as excited as I was to watch Buffalo versus the Steelers, I was already kind of losing a little bit of interest. And then that night game, like the Monday, we'll get to the Monday night game. I mean, I watched the first quarter on my television, and after that, even I conceded to let's watch something else, and I'll just watch this on my phone on mute, because like it just was getting too much, and then that game was just not good. It was not fun to watch.
But I guess also the other element here, right, is only one game this weekend was close.
Only one game wasn't more than a one-score finish.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is it becomes, you got the kind of fatigue sets in just because you're also not really getting much excitement out of the games themselves. So that was an issue. The Chiefs-Dolphins game, I mean, in the end, yeah, it kind of went the way that I suppose we expected it to. The Dolphins just really didn't handle the conditions. I mean, they're not a team.
I think that's slightly unfair to say that, because this is like a Chiefs defense that has gone under the radar. They're a top 5 defense in almost every statistical measure. And I think everyone is just so focused on the offense that they always should say, like, yeah, and their defense can be good at times. But this year, they've been a really good defense. And this isn't the first time they've, like, shut down a good team. I mean, you look at the Bills, who will put up, 31 against the Steelers. The Chiefs held the Bills pretty well in the game that they, should have won had it not been for the Kadarius Toney offsides. That's a game they probably win, and held the the Bills to 20 that game, right? They lost 20-17, something like that. But like it's a good defense, and yes, I'm sure the weather played into it, but they basically shut down this Dolphins offense. I mean, they gave Hill that one catch, and then after that they demolished him. I mean, there's I don't know if you saw the videos of Snead just manhandling him on the line in press. Like they're a physical defense. They have a good secondary, and I think that defense is what's gonna potentially beat the Bills. I don't think it's gonna be the Chiefs' offense. I think it's gonna be their defense. But the weather was ridiculous. Like having said all that, the weather that's just, and I hate weather games. That was just fucking stupid.
We'll leave that out of it, because just to respond to what you said, this Chiefs defense is, it's good. I think, certainly second half of the season, they've kind of rallied, but also with a slightly easier schedule. I think in a sense, it kind of flatters them slightly with some of the teams that they got to play down the stretch. But yes, they played well. Yes, they maybe at times are underappreciated, but still, this Dolphins team, in pretty much any other set of circumstances, is not scoring only 7 points, is not only netting 209 total yards. You can be the biggest Dolphins doubter in the world, which I think both of us, for the most part, were, in terms of not feeling like they could beat the very best teams. But one thing you could kind of guarantee from them was that they're going to have a decent offensive output in most games. And so you can give the Chiefs definitely deserve some credit for the defensive performance, but the conditions suited them far more than they suited the Dolphins. And, I think that was pretty telling as the game wore on. But, and honestly, if you're the Chiefs, you just have to dream that the remainder of their playoff games are in cold conditions. Obviously, the Super Bowl won't be in Vegas in an arena, but they might get lucky that the remainder of their AFC slate of games could be in cold weather. And they are probably a team not only experienced in dealing with those conditions, but kind of built to thrive there, because you then do get Mahomes evading pressure in the backfield, able to pick up some extra yards on the ground. It brings in their kind of tight end heavy play, really suited to the idea of kind of chipping your way down the field. Their run game is pretty effective. Like everything starts to look better for them. It does cover up for most of their weaknesses. So obviously playing the Bills this weekend, I guess there's a strong chance that those might be cold and snowy conditions again. And, we might find ourselves with a Chiefs team kind of skating their way to a Super Bowl and then getting just absolutely blown out in the Super Bowl itself. But we'll see.
Man, your disrespect for the Chiefs at times is great. I mean, I didn't see anything in that performance that was them taking advantage and winning only because of the weather. I mean, they beat the Dolphins in every aspect. Their offense was better than the Dolphins' offense. Their defense was better than the Dolphins' defense. The fact that they were like nitpicking them. I mean, Rashee Rice had like 120 yards, and he's a receiver, and he had like a 40-yard catch. He had like a 30-yard catch. Like they weren't just dumping and dinking. Like it's that was a pretty solid offensive performance. I thought they looked pretty good.
Good. I'm glad you're being fooled. I'm glad.
Mahomes looked spectacular.
I'm glad that one performance is covered up for what we saw from the previous, basically, 12, 13 weeks of the regular season. But,
Was that you said? Regular season. That's right. Regular season.
But no, it was a good performance from them. There's no doubting that. I'm not trying to say they only won because of the weather, but I'll put it this way. Against a healthy Dolphins team on a neutral field, I don't think this Chiefs team wins. But certainly against that very weakened Dolphins team, in those conditions, they deserve to be favorites, and they prove the point. I think there's... And am I ruling out the fact that they can win?
Wait, I'm confused though, because didn't they play on a neutral field in Germany against a healthy Dolphins team and beat the Dolphins?
We kind of went over this. I don't want to.
That's literally what you just said.
The Dolphins should have won. The Dolphins should have won that game, though. The Dolphins outplayed them for that game. I mean, that's, that was, and yeah, you're gonna. I know you love to say how I do this, the kind of But the reality is, yeah, I think we got to see what that matchup looked like. And from an eye test perspective, I know which team is better. But we'll have to see going forward. I guess I've not been a big believer in this Dolphins team at any point in this season, and I'm not a big believer in this Chiefs team. So the fact that one of them had to knock the other out doesn't mean that I got to change my opinion on the other one. Ultimately the Chiefs can prove me wrong more this weekend, a little bit against the Bills. But really, when they could prove me wrong is if they play a serious test like the Ravens. Because even this Bills team, and we'll probably get to that in our analysis of the Bills game, but the Bills don't exactly wow me on a consistent basis either. On to the next game then, I guess.
We don't want to mention Andy Reid's mustache.
No, I guess no, that was kind of gross. I didn't actually like that they were.
Here's what I'd hook at. What was that was frozen? Is that snot?
I mean, I guess so. Because as someone who has, who has facial hair, who has a mustache, I mean, yeah, if you're in cold conditions, obviously your nose is running.
I know, like it's not water. That's what it's like. Like, where's water getting onto his mustache from?
Well, the only way, I guess, if he's drinking, then maybe water will get onto your mustache. That's the one thing. So maybe it's a combination of both, but it's kind of gross.
So gross.
Like
when they showed that, I was significantly grossed out.
It's gross to be zooming in on it and really giving us a close-up view of it. And honestly, it makes me judge him as a human being he has to be aware of it and to not be like wiping it off or dealing with it. Like to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to let my snot freeze on my mustache. Who doesn't?
That was almost as disgusting as Jackson Mahomes dancing on Sean Taylor's memorial.
The only other talking point I'm going to have from that game to just call into question the NFL's safety protocols and monitoring of players' health. The fact that Mahomes managed to have his helmet cracked on a play and then played the ensuing play, and then only after that was kind of told that he had to change his helmet. How that is possible with all the cameras and the people who are supposed to be overseeing this, it blows my mind.
It's crazy. It's great. And there's a few things after watching this weekend that I think really the NFL needs to change. And I don't understand why they're not. And maybe we can get them later, but the two main ones that I would like to discuss is one, how sometimes like upstairs, quote unquote, can quickly change a call without like a challenge, but then sometimes it doesn't. If that's what you're going to do, then I would say almost every time just have that happen then. Like, why waste challenges on some of those things, like some of those fumbles that were clearly fumbles? Like, upstairs saw that very quickly. Like, that's annoying. And two, the fact that they still hold to this stupid only two challenge in today's NFL this year, when there were so many piss poor calls that you're going to like penalize a team for like questioning the ref's abilities to correctly call a play and then have both of their challenges be gone in the first quarter when they were right on one and probably kind of right on the second, because what the ref said wasn't really what happened. They just got lucky that something else, and we'll talk about that at the Steelers game. But like that whole two challenge system is really fucking stupid too. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't understand how there is this like upstairs booth that's watching with 50 screens but misses things like this. I don't know what they're doing up there. Are they like just posting TikToks and not really watching the videos? Like, it's a little crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I get it that the kind of the help coming from elsewhere when it's spotting the ball correctly or, those really basic decisions, but it's a little bit of a gray area. Yeah. Some catches can be ruled incomplete just with the help of that. And I get it. They're trying to kind of cover up for clear and obvious mistakes.
So what's clear and obvious, right?
Like, yeah. But there are times when it definitely makes things a little bit more complicated than it probably should be.
Did you see the issue Mahomes had when he tried to put on the new helmet? Like that it was like they showed a few times like he was having trouble putting it on. It was because it was frozen solid, they said. So all the padding on the inside like wasn't moving because it was frozen.
Which
it's crazy.
It's just crazy because sometimes with these NFL teams, like we're talking about multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
You'd think that where you're putting your helmet would be warmed. You'd think all of these, or you're keeping them inside something, that they're not just sitting outside waiting to be used just in case. Like there's so many times where we see an element of almost kind of amateurism in this, one of the biggest sporting leagues in the world. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
All right, and then that brings us on to the Sunday games, where I guess in a sense the first game, one of the bigger talking points, obviously we've already mentioned it, but the Cowboys no show against a decent opposition. I mean, the Packers again, the second half of the season from Thanksgiving onwards. I mean, when they beat the Lions on Thanksgiving, I think everyone viewed that as a kind of major upset. And as you look back on it historically, right? Maybe we kind of read too much into that in terms of the Lions falling off from that moment onwards. And in actual fact, that wasn't as bad of a loss as it first looked. And the Packers definitely played well. I mean, again, kind of, you wanted to give the Chiefs some credit. I think there's no denying the fact that the Packers just outplayed the Cowboys, but just a complete no-show from the Cowboys in that game. And I think more concerningly, from a Cowboys perspective, they definitely seemed to basically quit in that basically the second quarter. And also then you look at what was going on in the sidelines in terms of how CeeDee Lamb was interacting with other players. I mean,
in like the first series, that was so weird.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a team that believes much in itself or in the teammates. And definitely, you have to assume that Mike McCarthy can not stay as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, it was just a strange performance. The Packers came out and then quickly scored that touchdown. Not quickly, I should say, but like drove down the field and didn't look like they weren't going to score. And then the Cowboys got the ball back, pretty kind of crappy drive. But then they stopped them the next drive. They stopped the Packers, and then they got the ball back, and you thought, okay, like maybe they got it out of their system, like they were nervous or just a little off, they're going to get into a rhythm. And then Dak threw that stupid pick. And then it was like another touchdown, and then another stalled drive, and then another touchdown, and then that was it. Like they just kept digging the hole, deeper and deeper. It was, Dak did not play well. He had a few sacks. Like there was a few plays where, they looked like they were seemingly driving, and he'd either get sacked or just make a really poor throw. He did not look good in the backfield at all there. And those interceptions were bad.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just kind of amazing from a team that on offense looked so good over the course of the season. I mean, that you could have legitimately made the case for being the best offense in football. And I could have imagined a scenario in which they lost this game. But to me, that was going to be them losing 45-40, where just their defense couldn't get a stop and just a kind of shootout. And the fact that, I mean, I guess if you're being kind, in the second half, they kind of woke up. And maybe if they'd played like they did in the second half the entire game, then maybe the outcome would have been different. But then if you're kind of viewing it from a Packers perspective, obviously the way they were playing was different. And, you're also looking at a Cowboys team that was then playing with nothing to lose. So that changes your play calling and the decision making that you're having. And you couldn't have approached the game like that from the first snap. So, yeah, I mean, just undoubtedly the most disappointing performance on a wild card weekend that had plenty of teams who will be disappointed in their performances. The Cowboys are the standout.
Yeah, even when they were down 27-0, and then they scored at the end of the half to go 27-7, knowing they're getting the ball back. They got the ball back and drove down the field, and there was part of me that said like, "Oh, here we go! Like this is gonna happen." And then they stalled out terribly. Like, what are they on, like the 15 or something like that? They stalled out so bad, and kick that field goal. And then even then, you're kind of like 27-10, a lot of game left. They can do this. And then instantly, the Packers scored in like 5 plays. And then they get the ball back and they score a touchdown. He said, okay, now maybe this is it. And the Packers got the ball just like, I think that was like a 2-play drive or something like that. That was like the bomb that they caught and ran the whole way. Like there was like I still was holding hope even when they were down like multiple scores. Like if they could just stop the Packers once, but they didn't. I don't think they even stopped them almost at all in the second half until the Packers were just like, this is too much. Like we feel bad for you guys. We're just gonna put on the brakes here.
Yeah, no, I mean, the scoreline in the end was kind to the Cowboys because that should have been a 30-point loss, basically. And instead, because they managed to get these kind of garbage time touchdowns. And at one moment in time, obviously, the Packers even had to bring their starters back in for that sort of final possession because they were worried enough that with a 16-point lead, that if something stupid happened with their backups in, that they could suddenly be looking at a 1-score game with, just over 2 minutes to go. So, the score line, if you didn't watch the game at all and then you just looked at the score, you might feel like, oh, well, the Cowboys probably played okay. Their defense was really bad and just no part of them played well. I mean, in that first half, that was a complete write-off. It looked like you were watching one of the worst teams in the NFL play. If you told me that was Panthers against the Packers, I would have believed you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, that first half was awful. And you thought maybe that was just they just got caught off guard. The long halftime, you thought maybe they could come back, and then they just continued. Their defense just continued to let up big play after big play. That was just a complete meltdown. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
but again, the Packers looked good, but I hesitate as to whether that was just a complete mental and physical collapse of the Cowboys. And now going to San Fran against a team that I don't think will mentally collapse that quickly, if at all. You know what I mean? Like I think they are a solid team, but that would happen where even if the Niners went down 2 scores, I don't think at any point in time are they just like, fuck it, let's just not play anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if necessarily that's exactly how the Cowboys reacted, but I do think this is
their defense.
This is a much sterner test for the Packers playing against San Francisco. Again, this is the kind of putting my Niners Nation hat officially on. If you wanted to have one big
on the whole podcast,
if you wanted to have one big takeaway from this weekend, right, is things have just fallen into place for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, absolutely no excuses to not be in the Super Bowl now. Because basically every team that you would have thought maybe posed a real test to them on the NFC side of things, the Cowboys being the biggest one because they really in the second half of the season it started to look really good. The Eagles, okay, second half of the season looked really bad, but you could have spun a narrative where they kind of figured things out as the playoffs wore on. And now you're in a situation where, their toughest test is the Lions. And I'm not trying to be dismissive of the Lions, but realistically, I wouldn't say that's a Super Bowl caliber team. So for the 49ers, things have really fallen into place on the NFC side of things. Absolutely no excuses if this team is not playing in the Super Bowl. And even to a certain extent, you could say from the Ravens' perspective, things looking a little bit better. I mean, they too could say that no one really wowed them in that wildcard weekend on the AFC side, but still the AFC now looks, it's interesting, right? Because when we were kind of discussing it a couple months ago, I said, well, the NFC is like a 1-point favorite to play against the AFC, and I would take the NFC every day of the week. And now going into the second round of the playoffs, the AFC definitely looks stronger. Like I only see one potential Super Bowl winner on the NFC side of things, whereas maybe you could say there are 3 potential Super Bowl winners on the AFC side of things.
Yeah. Then we got to the Sunday night, and that was, as you mentioned, Lions-Rams. The Lions won 24-23. Did the best team win here?
Um, I think people are being hard on the Lions. I think that like the takeaway from this is that the Rams maybe outplayed them or maybe are the better team just because you do see that kind of big playability that they have. But it kind of felt like, certainly in the first half, as if the Lions were just slightly manhandling the Rams at times. The Lions were always in position to kind of put this game to bed. They got up into positions where they needed one more good drive, one more score to put themselves in a really comfortable position, and they were never able to do that. This was undoubtedly the best game of the weekend, obviously from coming down, like going down to the wire, both teams playing, I think, relatively well within their own sort of abilities. I think the Lions deserve to win.
Yeah, I think they deserve to win. Like I don't get out of this game, like, oh, the Lions, they should not be in this next round. I do think they weren't the better team in this game. And maybe I am being slightly unfair on the fact that, to me, what decided this game was the Rams' complete inability to score a touchdown in the red zone. And maybe that's because the Lions' defense is just a great red zone defense. Maybe. But at the same time, I mean, you look at they had 3 major field goals that should have, you would hope at least 2 of those have been touchdowns. They were first and goal from the 6. They got 0 yards from there, first and goal in the 6. In the second half, they were first and 10 from the 11. So basically on the 10. They actually lost 2 yards on that drive. And then the last one, which was at the end of the game, they were first and 10 from the 13. And they got 2 yards on that drive. So three drives basically seemingly at the 10-yard line with 0 yards in 9 plays. That's terrible. And you're right, they are a big play team, and maybe that's the only way they can score. But I don't know if that's the Lions defense or if that's just them kind of just not having a great offensive strategy in the red zone. But to me, I think if one of those is a touchdown, this is a complete different game. I'm not saying they win. But I'm saying if they can get one of those, that changes the landscape. Where in the second half, the Lions didn't do anything the entire second half.
No, and look, it's a weird game, right? Because Stafford had 367 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So that looks like a great game. But then, yeah, when you look at his red zone performance, they're 0 for 3 in the red zone. Stafford was 2 for 7 in the red zone. He only had 7 yards inside the Lions' 20-yard line. The Rams only rushed the ball for 2 yards on the other 3 plays that they attempted within the red zone. So basically, they got 9 yards off 10 plays in the red zone. So yeah, as the field got compressed, definitely you saw a difference. And so if you're trying to look at that from the Lions getting lucky, yeah, you could say that the Rams on another day probably aren't that inefficient in the red zone, no matter how bad their red zone offense is and no matter how good the Lions' red zone defense is. Like that's, statistically you wouldn't expect something to be as inefficient as that. But then you could also look and say that really the only thing driving the Rams offense for the most part was Puka Nacua, because, he was 181 yards from his 9 passes. All of the other Rams receivers combined was 186 yards from 16. So really, they are a big play offense. They do heavily rely on that fact. And, maybe they're just not built properly to be able to punch the ball in when they do get into those red zone positions. This is the one game where you do feel like legitimately it could have gone either way. And I don't think I don't think the Lions could have felt too aggrieved had they lost the game. And I don't think the takeaway could have been that like the worst team won, certainly, because you can make a case for either one of these teams potentially being better. Ultimately, I think it was a pretty even matchup and the Lions just edged it. But, I think over the course of the season, I feel like they deserve that a little bit more, and that doesn't matter, right? It's not a factor or relevant, but it's a nice story, obviously, for them, a team that's been starved of playoff success for such a long time. And, this Rams team, maybe fighters to deceive at times. Just, those big plays can cover up for maybe not being quite as good as they sometimes might appear to be.
Yeah, it's I think you're right. Maybe the Lions overall had the more consistent season, so it's better to see them in the next round.
I mean, the real takeaway from this is, do you think if they could go back in time, do you think the Cowboys would now like that 2-point conversion from from the Lions to stand? Like, are the Cowboys, there's a very good chance that the Cowboys are still in the playoffs had they not had the benefit of a slightly controversial officiating decision in week 17 of the NFL regular season. Like, we kind of talk about how these sort of weird sliding doors moments happen, but it might have been, they arguably maybe had a tougher playoff matchup as a result. Like, it could turn out that this Packers team is better than the Rams.
I mean, this Packers team lost to the Giants.
Yeah.
Let's keep in mind,
No,
and that wasn't a long time ago. That was like 4 weeks ago.
Oh, no. Look, I am. We've spoken about it for the last few years, really not trying to overreact to what we see in the Wildcard Weekend, because I think there's a big temptation to do that. I'm not overreacting in terms of the Chiefs. I'm not going to overreact in terms of what I saw from the Packers. Those are, and we'll get on to it. I'm not going to overreact to what we saw from the Buccaneers either. But, there are a few teams here who could try and trick us into thinking they are legitimately very good, and I'm not buying it quite yet.
All right. Well, let's move on to Monday, with the first game being the game that was pushed back because of the weather, and we can talk about the weather a little bit. But I want to start. This is what I want to say. The Bills in that game, I never for 1 second thought the Bills weren't going to win that game by like 10 or more points. But at the same time, I thought the Bills were going to blow that game. And this is what blows my mind about the Bills. Like, I watched that game and I said, like, you watch the first two drives, you're like, oh, there is no way the Bills aren't going to completely manhandle the Steelers. And then you watch the game more and you think, are the Bills really going to blow this? Like, I'd have zero confidence right now, no matter how good they look. I don't get it. I don't understand what it's like. The opposite of the Eagles, where we watch the Eagles win week after week in the beginning of the year, and we both said, like, I don't understand how they're winning these games. They don't look very good. Like, yeah, their record might be 10-1, but they look like they're like a 500 team. The Bills are like the opposite. They look phenomenal, but yet somehow you think they're going to lose.
Yeah, and had they not benefited from that fast start and some Steelers errors early on, they might not have won that game. And I know it's going to hurt you to say, right? But I think the Steelers deserve some credit for not quitting in that game, because if we compare it with what happened to the Cowboys, and they almost found themselves in identical situations to a certain extent early on, the Steelers kept plugging away and kind of believing in themselves and never really got within touching distance. But I don't disagree with you. I never thought the Bills were going to lose, but there were a couple times when the Steelers got the ball back down 2 scores, and you thought, man, if they score here, I don't know. I don't know if I totally trust Josh Allen in this offense to not do something dumb when they get the ball back. And at the same time, as kind of inefficient as the Steelers offense is, I just feel like they might be able to put a drive together when they really need to, because this Bills defense, I don't totally trust it either. And I know you might highlight obviously the kind of situation that led to the Bills burning their challenges, but ultimately the Steelers got kind of screwed with a lot of those officiating decisions over the course of that game.
I don't think you can say that. I mean, there were a few calls, but again, this was a game where there were so many bad calls, like both ways. And I mean, had there not been challenges, people would be up in arms with how many terrible calls the Bills got. And like, yeah, there were a few calls that went against the Steelers, but I don't ultimately think that puts them anywhere near winning this game.
Okay, I mean, one crucial one, right? Ignore that. I'm not even going to go down to the final play because I think final offensive play for the Steelers. I'll put it this way. I think the Bills get that call if roles are reversed. I do think there are certain situations where either home team or non-big team to a certain extent, you don't get all the same calls. But the standout one, and came at a crucial time, was completely ignoring offensive lineman just destroying a Steelers player with a hit to the back of the head that also helped push the Steelers for the Bills for a crucial first down. And that one, if that call had been if that had been enforced correctly, that was at a time of the game when that was when the Bills could have seen things start to slip away. And you don't want to highlight, you get into that tendency of kind of highlighting, well, if this had happened, and you're right, because you could do it on the other side of things as well. But I do think that the Steelers were slightly hosed by the officiating.
Yeah, I just think that was just overall a bad officiating game. I mean, there was a lot of holds you saw both ways that just weren't called. I don't know what was going on there. But, I mean, at the same time, the Steelers get slightly lucky with the Bills attempting a field goal in a situation they probably should not have attempted that field goal, and blocking it and taking it back and scoring and kind of jump starting on a play. I don't know. I still don't know why the Bills kicked that. Like, everyone was saying don't kick that, and they still wanted to kick it. And then that weird fumble. I get the call, kind of, but I did not see any definitive view where it really hits his helmet. There are like ones where like it kind of looks like, oh yeah, there it looks like it hit his helmet, but you never saw, like, there was, for some reason they didn't have the camera angle that clearly showed it like hits his helmet and bounces off on that fumble. But this brought up to, we have been discussing this before off podcasts about like what the rules are with challenges, because like, say the one we were doing off podcast was, say it's like 3rd and 8 and you run the ball and you think you get the first down, but they spot you short. If you challenge the spot, if their spot was off, but still isn't enough to get you the first down, but enough to move it, are they allowed to move it and then you win your challenge, or do you not, because the challenge is technically the spot gets you a first down? And like, I still don't know what I think actually what the rule is like, you challenge for the first down, not just that it's a bad spot. Like, I don't know if you can but you should be able to, like, say it's like 3rd and 8 and you challenge it and say it should be 3rd and 6. Like, that was a bad spot. So that's like one of them. And then this one is another one because the ref said that the ball was recovered out of bounds, and that's why it didn't go to the Bills. But that wasn't the case. It was that it actually hit the Steelers player. So they lose a challenge even though they were right in that the ref was wrong in what he said. So that was kind of weird. Like some of those inconsistencies with challenges. I just wish they would kind of get rid of the challenge and just, I would prefer like actually like a VAR and just everything go right to the booth.
So I kind of agree with you, and I do think there's some areas with challenges. I don't know what happens actually if you do challenge the spot of a ball and the spot is incorrect, but you don't get the first down. I don't know what happens there. Whether you retain your challenge because technically the decision was wrong. I think you might.
But we've never seen them still, because there are times where they're still short of the line to gain, but the spot was definitely bad, and we never see them slightly move the ball up. That never happens.
No. Where you do think teams where that most commonly comes into play is like on goal line situations, where there'll definitely be times where they'll mark them and like, oh, it's 3rd and goal from the 1.5 yard line, and you look at like they were inside the 1.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you want to challenge this? Like, wouldn't you want to get suddenly only half a yard away? But obviously, the risk reward is not worth it at that point. But what I would say to you is, I don't want to get rid of challenges. Trying to take some sort of learn something from other sports. What I would like to see adopt maybe the cricket rule. So in cricket, when you challenge, similar thing, you've got, depending on the format of the game, usually you have two challenges. If you challenge a decision and it is then shown that it was a sort of marginal call, but you stick with the on-field decision. So like an LBW decision in cricket, where it's then umpire's call. So basically what they've said is this is within the potential margin of error, but we stick with whatever the original call is. You stick with the call on the field, but you retain your review. And what I would like to see in the NFL is when they say, because they have the sort of call stands, the kind of weird wording that they have where they're like, we didn't make the wrong decision, but we haven't seen enough evidence.
It's probably not right, but we don't have enough evidence to say we're wrong.
And when they find themselves in that situation, I think it should be, we're sticking with the call on the field, but you haven't lost your review. Because basically the technology you've tried to use has not been able to resolve this issue. And we're not going to punish you for that fact. Yeah. So we're not going to punish you because it just so happens that happened on the one area of the field where we don't have, like, oh, sorry, the Steelers player just like threw his body in front of the camera at just the wrong time. We're pretty sure he fumbled it, but we don't know. That's a situation where it should say, we got to stick with the call on the field, but you get to keep your review. We're not going to punish you for probably doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I also think they need to get rid of this. You have to get both right to get another. If you challenge a call and you get it right, you keep a challenge. You get two, and if you get both of them wrong, you're done. If you get one of them wrong, you got one left. Like this, it's such bullshit. Like, I mean, the Bills, if they go and lose that game, I'd be rightfully pissed because I'm sure there probably would have been another play had they lost that game that was a questionable call. And they've lost their challenges in the first quarter on two plays where the rest were wrong. And they just happened to get out from a technicality that they weren't wrong. And then the Bills have no challenges left when they were trying to like fix the errors of the refs. Like that's very unfair. So yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's a pretty good idea. What you said as well. To like, if a call stands and it's they don't lose a challenge for challenging something that was probably they were right about, but they just can't prove it. I thought you were going to say we bring in some of the cricket technology and we can watch the sound of hits and things like that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, maybe that too. And, all sorts of ball tracking technology that the NFL just kind of seems to refuse to use.
Or what about for like roughing the passers and like when they do, so like the other call, right, was
like hotspot to see exactly where they made contact.
Well, I was thinking like, like when Allen did that slide and the guy came over the top, it looked really bad. But it was kind of like Allen sold it and like threw his head back. Because then when you watch it in slow-mo, he actually never even touches his upper body. Like Allen just throws his head back. If they had a technology that could show you the force that like he actually hits his head or his upper body, if it's like below a threshold of force, they don't call it. And the same for like roughing the passer. Like there are times where like they push the quarterback, but the quarterback embellishes it. If they could like calculate what the actual force that he gets pushed on if it hits the threshold. That'd be awesome.
Does the threshold change from one quarterback to another? Because the force required to push Josh Allen over is different from the force required to push.
That's where Josh Allen is lucky because he's a mammoth of a man. He probably won't get knocked over with the same force that Bryce Young gets thrown out of the stadium with.
Now, I think that Josh Allen roughing the passer one needs some. Oh, I'll say one other thing just before we move on actually on the reviews. The other thing that sucks about the current review system, right, is that the reviews become more and more valuable as the game kind of presses on, right? Like overturning a decision late in the fourth quarter is much more important than overturning a decision in the first quarter. And at the same time, your timeouts become more and more valuable as the game pushes on. So you find yourself in this weird situation where both wanting to get the correct decision is more important, but the thing that you're going to risk losing becomes worth more. And I don't know exactly how to solve that, but it kind of needs to be solved too, because your teams are sometimes knowingly turning down a potential big review because they think, well, we're losing and we need these 3 timeouts because we can't burn one now and then potentially just end up finding themselves like the Rams did, right? In a situation where they needlessly kind of burned timeouts and then didn't have them when they really needed them. On to that, Josh Allen, the roughing the passer, well, not roughing the passer,
Roughing the slide.
yeah, unnecessary
Delayed
roughness,
hit.
or yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because obviously you have him kind of pretending to slide on his 52-yard touchdown or whatever
I
that
didn't
is.
really see that as much as other people. Like some people were like up in arms, like it was nowhere near the Kenny Pickett fake slide where Pickett literally like is 3/4 down into a slide and pops up. Like I thought he kind of was just, he's so big that it's tough for his body to move.
Here's where the difference is. I agree with you. Like Pickett was definitely intentionally doing a fake slide. I don't think Josh Allen was, but I think Josh Allen found himself in a position of like, uh-oh, two defensive players coming towards me. And for a moment thought, I'm going to slide, slowed his body down and kind of started the process, and then went, no, I can keep going. So it's not like he was trying to game the system, but what that definitely did to the Steelers defenders that were there was they definitely stopped. Like there were definitely two players in a position there to make a tackle who that time around didn't, and it ends up in a touchdown. And I can understand walking to the sideline and then being told, next time you fucking hit him. Because we can't have, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, we find ourselves in this unfortunate situation, right? And the inconsistency, like, you have Josh Allen, who's a definite threat with his legs, who you have those, and then that's a 15-yard penalty. And then you compare and contrast that with the Flacco one against the Texans, where, okay, you can make the argument that the guy initiated his tackle attempt before Flacco started sliding. It's super marginal, but you can make the case. But are you telling me that to tackle Joe Flacco, you need to be throwing yourself head on in a downward trajectory towards his ankle? Like, you can't tell me that guy, in a sense, didn't know that the slide was starting from the angle that he's taking to attempt the tackle. And those inconsistencies, again, they're just a killer.
But yeah, and that's what I don't have as much sympathy for the defensive players as other people do, because when you watch the late hits they're getting, it's not as if they're like trying to tackle and then as they're sliding, like the guy goes underneath their tackle and then they happen to like hit their head. Almost every time it's a guy diving down towards the ground, and you are not tackling, especially a quarterback. You can maybe say Josh Allen, you're going to take his legs out, but every other quarterback in the NFL, you're not trying to like dive and take out his ankles on a tackle. You're just going to wrap him up straight up. So this whole thing of like, he was already initiating a tackle. Really? Because don't see many players initiating a tackle by throwing their shoulder into the ground. Like, they're clearly trying to do it purposefully. And like, whatever, like, they want to do that, they want to do that, but you're going to get called. So, and that's kind of where, yeah, like I don't agree with the defensive logic of like, this isn't fair.
No, yeah, it's a tough one. And as I said, that Joe Flacco one, by the book, it's the right call. So I'm not saying anything was done incorrectly, because if you do the time frame, the slide, now you then start to get into, was like Flacco slowing down? Does the defensive player basically know the slide starting? Also, it's Joe Flacco. Like, at what point is the defensive player almost assuming that the slide is going to start? Because it's like, Joe Flacco is not going to try and run through contact here. So I'm definitely getting the slide. But yeah, next time, show me a player trying to make an open field tackle against Joe Flacco who tries to head first dive into his ankles as the way that he thinks is the most efficient way to take down a somewhat athletic 39-year-old. Like, I don't think that's going to be.
Are you saying somewhat athletic compared to just the general population?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Not compared to NFL players. I mean, for a 39-year-old, he's somewhat athletic.
For a 39-year-old they pulled off a couch, he is above average athleticism.
Yeah. And then I guess wrap things up then with the last game. We can kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit. We doubted the Eagles all season long, although both of us thought that they would win this wildcard game. And in a sense, we got to see everything that we thought was wrong with the Eagles over the course of this season compiled into a single game. Their defense wasn't great. Their offense was awful. It looked like the players quit as well. Hurts didn't look like he had the trust of the team around him. I mean, he was, again, saw on the sidelines, players talking to him. He looked
He
just
didn't
kind of
look
like
great.
he looked like a zombie
What
for
was
much
that
of that game.
safety play? What was his
Yeah.
goal there? Was he just going to try and run around Madden style for 20 minutes? Just throw the
Yeah,
fucking
maybe.
ball away, dude. You clearly were outside the pocket. Just throw it away.
And again, the thing with that Eagles team is, as bad as they were, when they scored that touchdown to get it to 16-9, I thought, okay, they're going to win. Now, admittedly, when they failed on the 2-point conversion, which again,
Yeah.
if you want to defend them, missed face mask call. I mean, just a player just trying to rip Jalen Hurts' head off to stop him from getting into the end zone.
Bucs have great success stopping that play too.
But that felt like a little bit of a momentum shifter.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I thought, okay, the Eagles are going to win. Like, this is going to be annoying because we're going to once again look at a situation where they didn't play well, where they probably should have lost, and they're going to end up winning by 3 points or 7 points. And then annoyingly, they're probably going to win. Like, we're going to end up with the Eagles in the Super Bowl, even though I don't think they're particularly good. And then just the wheels came off in the second half.
Yeah. And again, this is another game where we're talking about the losing team. The Bucs played well, and they played well despite Mike Evans probably having one of the worst games I've ever seen him play. At 3 drops, one was a easy touchdown drop. And he wasn't the only one. I think they had like 5 or 6 drops that game. I mean, Baker Mayfield put up 337. He could have put up 437 the way he was slinging it. I mean, they were in total control of that game. And if it weren't for those drops, I think this game they could have been in the 40s and 50s even. Like, this could have been an absolute thromping. So they played really well, surprisingly well. I did not think they would come out and manhandle the Eagles like that. And, you're right. Maybe we should have expected that, and maybe we're still so dumb for thinking that playoffs would change that. They had a negative 90-point differential in their last 7 games, the Eagles. I mean, this is a team that is just imploded. And nothing makes me happier than seeing Sirianni. It never gets old when I see that Sirianni clip of him coming down the Chiefs tunnel and doing the like screaming at the fans, and then everything, it's like he's been 1 and X since that game. Like every week the number keeps adding up higher and higher, and I just love seeing it every time. And yeah, it was. I guess my question to you: do you feel vindicated with Baker's performance here?
I feel vindicated in a sense from both Baker's performance and the Eagles' performance. Like, even though my predictions for the game itself are completely wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I feel like we got to see, again, why you'd want Baker Mayfield as a playoff quarterback. Like, you can just tell it's kind of meaningless, right? But you can tell how much he cares, how like zoned in he is. And again, his willingness he would have run through a wall at some point if he needed to help the Bucs win that game. He played extremely well. You're right. I mean, they had so many drops. That game could have been it was a blowout anyway, but it could have been an even larger blowout had they not had those. But yeah, he played well.
Did you hear the story from Joe Buck about Baker? No. About so when he went to he was in Carolina, and apparently he was like just completely demoralized, and just wasn't being himself, wasn't playing well. And then he took the end of last season and went to the Rams. And McVay supposedly pulled him aside, and they had like a big talk, and kind of, Baker said, I don't know what's going on, blah, blah. And McVay told him, you're a passionate guy, and that's what makes you great. You have to love the game, because that's what sets you apart, and that's what makes you the great player you are, is that you have that love and that intensity for the game that a lot of other players don't have, and you need to find that again. And he said that was like the switch that like turned him back on to being like, I need to be who I am and get excited about playing. And I mean, it looks like, you're right, like it definitely looks like this year he looks like a different player. He looks like how he was at Oklahoma this year versus when he was on the Panthers, when it was like, I've got to play another week here in Carolina. He will run through a wall. He'll do anything right now. It's a total 180.
Yes, but then going back to the point I made earlier to not wanting to overreact to wildcard weekend performances, we're 1 week removed from this team scoring 9 points against the Panthers. So, yes, they played extremely well. I just don't know. The difference between very good teams in the NFL and okay teams is consistency, right? It's not ability most of the time. And we saw probably the very best of the Buccaneers up against the very worst of the Eagles. And there's nothing that makes me think we're going to see the very best of the Buccaneers next weekend. But it was a very good performance. They deserve their win. I think the most impressive performance of the weekend in terms of really making me think twice about how I thought about them. The Packers are really impressive, but they had been so good over the second half of the season that this was just sort of confirming some of what we'd seen from them so far. Whereas this was really showing that, hey, if the Buccaneers, if things go their way, they can be a difficult team to beat in the playoffs. Versus everyone wants to play the Buccaneers in the playoffs. It's the team that is lucky to even be there in the first place.
Yeah, and then that wraps up the wild card weekend. And going into next week, you have in order, the Saturday early game is Houston-Baltimore. And then the Saturday late game is Green Bay-San Fran. So both the 1 seeds playing on Saturday. And then Sunday, you have the early game is Bucs-Detroit. And then the Sunday night game, which I think is the right move to put this as a kind of marquee matchup, being the Chiefs versus the Bills, but this time at Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best slate of games for the divisional round, right? But it's pretty good. And yeah, the Chiefs-Bills game is the standout. We'll obviously do our full preview and predictions on the next episode. But yeah, it's a decent. I'm sure you'll include them in the previews, but there's some good storylines heading into these various games. But we're maybe denied some of the kind of star power matchups that we were hoping for as a result of some teams underperforming.
Yeah. And actually, Eddie, I'm going to give you an early storyline as a little bit of a preview spoiler here, and it's going to lead into a little trivia. So this year in the playoffs, there is not one quarterback remaining in the divisional round that is 30 years or older. Everyone is under 30 years of age. Can you put the 8 remaining quarterbacks in order of their age?
Do I go oldest to youngest?
It is difficult. You can do whatever you want. It is difficult. There are a clump at the top.
So I'll go youngest to oldest, I guess.
Okay.
I'm going to assume CJ Stroud is the youngest.
CJ Stroud, 22 years old.
Now it gets a little tricky to know who's second.
Not really.
I mean, why not really?
I just think, if you just think of basics like years in league.
Yeah, but haven't Purdy and Love been in the league for the same amount of time?
No, Purdy was a rookie last year. This is Love's 3rd year.
Oh. Okay, so Purdy.
Yep, Purdy, 24.
Love.
Love, 25.
Okay. Now it gets tough because I think they're going to be pretty close, all the remaining ones, I think.
Yep.
I'm going to say the oldest. I'm going to skip now.
Okay.
I'm going to now work my way back down. I think the oldest is Mahomes.
Not the oldest.
Is it Lamar?
Lamar, not the oldest.
Goff?
Goff is the oldest, 29 years old.
Is Mahomes the second oldest?
Mahomes is 3rd oldest at 28.
Is Lamar the second oldest?
No.
Baker Mayfield?
Yes, okay. I'll put you out of your misery. From youngest to oldest, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, still only 27 years old. That's like the crazy one because he came out so early and started so early. Next is Josh Allen, also 27 years old. Patrick Mahomes, 28. Baker Mayfield, an older 28. And Jared Goff, 29. So we're going into a divisional round where Baker Mayfield is the second oldest quarterback in the round, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to order them in terms of number of playoff appearances, right? Because you then get really interesting because like Purdy would kind of, based off the fact that he's played, 2 playoff games, would suddenly be more experienced than some of them. Like, I mean, Baker, how many playoff games has Baker played now? He's played a couple, right?
He's played a few.
Like, but that would be interesting too. Anyway, yeah, it should be an interesting slate of games. In other NFL news, kind of also taking us into a different sport a little bit.
Well, wait. Let's finish. One more thing, because I know what you're going to transition to already.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. But before we get on to the rugby turned NFL players, we have a lot of coaches that have been fired and a lot of coaches that are still available and interviewing. The latest one being the Falcons have announced that they've interviewed Bill Belichick. But out of all the teams that just lost in this round, who should be firing their coach? And I think the main ones, obviously, to talk about are Dallas with McCarthy and the Eagles with Sirianni.
I think the Eagles should 100% fire Sirianni based off the fact that to me...
And Tomlin. Let me throw Tomlin in there.
Tomlin I would keep.
Could never win a playoff game anymore.
I mean, that was tough, right? In the end, if you were being... I think the honest assessment is the Steelers probably played better in that playoff game than most neutrals expected. And their team isn't that... They overperform year on year. Now, if you wanted to really be... Like, if you're running the Steelers, part of you might say, Tomlin is hurting us in the long run because we keep overperforming. We're never bottoming out, and so we're never getting the draft picks we need to build a really good team.
And so we're never getting to the top. They never have a Super Bowl contending team, but they never have a top 5 draft pick contending team.
Yeah, and the way American sports work, you need to have a horrific season or two to be able to start that rebuild process, or an incredible amount of luck in terms of drafting a quarterback.
Like the Eagles.
Or a free agent landing in the right spot somehow. And obviously, I don't think Pittsburgh, the most desirable free agent.
I agree with you. I don't think Tomlin should get fired.
But to me, I think Tomlin and Belichick were 2 coaches who are in a position where they should be able to stay. If I own that team, I would say, as long as you want this job, barring some horrific scandal, this is your job for as long as you want it. Like, that's the sign I want to have within my organization, is that we acknowledge what someone has contributed to our success and we stick with them as a result of that. Sirianni, I would fire immediately. I think he's lost that team. I think when you look at everything that was going on in those final few weeks, I think if you look at the way he handles the pressure, I'm not convinced by him at all. So with the caliber of free agent head coaches that are available, which is the other thing you have to factor in, right? Is that right now you can go out and get a very good head coach. Because often the question is like, who are you replacing them with? And right now you have actually several coaches to choose from. I would fire Sirianni immediately.
I mean, this is a 34-17 record in the regular season and made it to the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that 34-17 with the team that he has is actually not that amazing. So I'm not that wowed. He's been really hurt in a sense by what their record is down the stretch of this regular season, because he was looking at probably having like a 40-12 record there instead or whatever. But I would fire Sirianni. Mike McCarthy, I think their playoff performance was more of an aberration than what we saw from the Eagles. But ultimately, I've never been the biggest Mike McCarthy fan. So again, with the caliber, if I'm Jerry Jones with the caliber of head coaches available, I would fire Mike McCarthy. But I think he's a little bit more hard done by than Sirianni. I think Sirianni, things have gone seriously wrong over the course of this season. Mike McCarthy, I think that was one really bad playoff performance.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on both of those. And especially when you say with the caliber out there. My concern is then you're getting to a point where, I mean, the caliber is what? 2 phenomenal coaches, right? In Belichick. And I think I would put Vrabel up there as a very, very good coach.
And the possibility of Pete Carroll.
and
I
Pete
know
Carroll.
he's technically
Yeah,
seemingly still with the Seahawks, but definitely if you're offering him a head coach job, he's coming.
but there are a lot of open spots. And what happens if you, let's say, fire McCarthy with the hope of getting Vrabel, but instead you're stuck with, I don't know, some up and coming offensive coordinator who stalls out even worse? Like it's a little bit of a risk because I don't understand truly why everyone says the Falcons are a great fit for Belichick. I get the division isn't great, but he's kind of going into the exact same scenario he's in with the Pats, where he doesn't have a good QB and he has a decent defense, but nothing great. The difference is it's an easier division. But like, if I'm Belichick, I think I've got to be choosing the Cowboys or the Eagles from a roster standpoint over the Falcons.
Well,
Maybe you don't want
100%.
to be with Jerry Jones. Maybe that's why I don't go to the Cowboys.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I would have thought that they are not a good match just because the level of control that Bill Belichick likes to have and then the level of control that Jerry Jones likes to have.
Exactly.
So they feel kind of incompatible from an ownership head coach standpoint. But maybe Belichick is realizing that as he's getting older, both he can't have that level of control and also he just can't manage it, that he has to focus his time more efficiently. So potentially going into this next role, he is considering that fact. If you're Belichick and you are definitely chasing, whether or not he would want to admit it, this wins record, you need to go somewhere where, because again, optimistically 3-4 more seasons, almost all of those have to be pretty good seasons. So, and ideally you want to win a Super Bowl in a 3-year window. So you really need to be going somewhere where they're already definitely playoff caliber. I think I would go to, if I were Bill Belichick and every job was offered to me, I would go to the Cowboys because I think defensively they're really good, which leans into his strengths. He could turn them into a really great defense. You have a quarterback who I think is good enough to win a Super Bowl, even if I don't think Dak Prescott is like really elite. And with a couple free agent signings or whatever, you could have a very, very good team.
We
So
forgot about Harbaugh, actually.
And yeah, but he's trash. I wouldn't want to touch him.
Who I think most people are predicting he might go to the Chargers because he's a QB coach, got a good QB, and he's a pretty boy, so he'll love the LA scene.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing to factor in when you're saying you could miss out on Vrabel, you could miss out on Belichick, you could miss out on Harbaugh. But even then, assuming if you were the Cowboys right now and you think, well, we're probably going to fire Mike McCarthy. I bet you the Eagles are also going to fire Sirianni. You then have to add 2 more head coaches into the mix. Okay, they're not going to rehire Mike McCarthy. They might hire Sirianni.
Oh my God.
So you could still, if you have any faith and if you're the Eagles and if you think Mike McCarthy is a good head coach, then you're also going to think, well, probably Mike McCarthy is also going to end up being a possibility here as well. And that's before other chips may still fall elsewhere. My mind wouldn't be blown if, with Khan and the Jacksonville Jags, if they thought, hey, let's push the boat out here and get a really good head coach, Doug Peterson. Thanks.
Do they do the Eagles move and go from Peterson to Sirianni?
That would be cool. I mean, if I were in charge of the Jags, I would also be looking at the head coaches available and thinking, with what I have in place, like Doug Peterson maybe had a lucky Super Bowl year, and aside from that, he doesn't look too great in terms of how he's been as a head coach. Let's try and bring in someone who can really turn things around here. But yeah, I think Tomlin, job for life, and the other 2 fired. But okay, you teased it. And yeah, the news coming out, breaking news, I think it came out a couple of hours ago, is that
well, in anticipation of the Six Nations squads being released, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that is that Louis Rees-Zamit, one of Wales's better players, I suppose, certainly one of their more exciting young prospects, has made the announcement that he will be leaving rugby to try and pursue a career in the NFL. He's going to go into the NFL International Pathways program that they have, where they sort of get players in from around the world and try and train them prepare them for the NFL draft. And then they enter the draft. If they do get drafted, then that's great. If they don't, they're then available as undrafted free agents. It'll be interesting to see. He obviously has no American football experience. Historically speaking, right? Mixed results when it comes to rugby players trying to adapt to the NFL. For the most part, certainly for position players, I'd say basically no successes. From the standout, obviously at the Eagles in terms of a lineman, but then when you get a physical freak who's 6'8" and super fast, it's not surprising to think that they can transition to being a decent NFL player.
So he's 6'3", 200 pounds, and he's incredibly fast. So he was clocked last year, or maybe earlier this year, going 24.2 miles per hour on a play, whereas Tyreek's top speed this year was 23.24. Now, I don't like that comparison, and it's annoying where they're like, he's faster than Tyreek. Tyreek's in pads and a helmet. He's got some significant weight and different baggage on him there. So let's just say, though, someone who could be as fast as Tyreek Hill on the field, but is 6'3", 200.
He's fast. Yeah, he's legitimately fast. I think he's widely considered to be like the third fastest player in international rugby. So he does have sort of legitimate sprint speed. But I think going into this, I think they said today he's like 10.8 meters per second is sort of what he says his speed is at. For comparison, I think Usain Bolt's like 10.4 something meters per second. So, difficult to kind of visualize what that looks like in terms of speed and quickness, but he's legitimately fast. Now, I think the storyline definitely, if he makes the NFL, will be rugby superstar ditches rugby to go to the NFL. And Rees-Zamit definitely burst onto the scene and was kind of this exciting prospect for Wales. His career has kind of stalled a little bit in rugby. He's had some injury issues. He's not an absolute certainty to be starting for Wales, even if he were available. So I think the storyline, how this gets spun in different areas, is interesting. Obviously, he can make far more money playing in the NFL than he can in rugby. Even being a sort of middle of the road NFL player would be astronomically more money than he can make as a superstar in rugby. And he's not going to be a superstar in rugby, so you can get why the decision makes sense. He claims, he said part of his reason for doing this is that he grew up loving the NFL. His dad played American football. So I guess compared to some players who've maybe tried to make this transition, you'd at least hope that he's coming into this with a full understanding of the sport, not needing to be taught the nuances of the rules and maybe some of the tactics and techniques. But I assume he's going to try and be a wide receiver. I can't see what other position he could possibly be. But he's small.
Yeah, the issue is, I think optimally a running back would be a better transition, because there's a lot more to a wide receiver than just speed, right? Route running is a huge issue, and then also just ability to catch the ball in a very different way than you're used to catching it in rugby. Whereas as a running back, it's a very similar style of kind of getting a short pitch or a handoff and then just flying, down the sidelines is a little easier, I think, of a transition than a receiver and saying run a skinny post route, and the technique and the footing in that is very, very different than rugby. So, and you have Christian Wade, right? He was supposed the fastest ever recorded rugby player, who then transitioned and played for the Bills and was a running back.
Yeah. And Rees-Zamit, certainly a better prospect. Wade was leading the Premiership in try scoring, but sort of never really established himself as an international rugby player. Rees-Zamit, at least a legitimate international rugby player. So, you could say, he's only 22 years old. So you could look into this, and say, basically, this is like a player coming out of college, but who's been in a professional sporting environment for a longer period of time. Like, there's a lot of positives to take away from that, but he's going to have to put on a lot of weight to play. Like, he's a pretty thin person from a. It's difficult to imagine what his physique will need to look like. Certainly to be a running back, he's going to have to put on a ton of mass, which is then going to sacrifice some speed. As a wide receiver, maybe that transition wouldn't have to be quite as extreme. But you're right. I mean, he's never had to, worry about catching a ball, like kind of jumping up and catching a ball and getting hit while he's doing it. There's a lot of things change very, you're getting tackled from 360 degrees, which in rugby, typically you're not. Like, the challenges are always coming from in front of you, possibly maybe to the side. Unless you've broken in front of someone, you're not getting tackled from behind. You're not taking hits in the same way. So, yeah, I would be surprised if he managed to establish himself. Someone's going to take a chance, because definitely physically, he's impressive enough that someone's going to say, let's put him on the practice squad. Let's see what he has. We'll hold it, for a couple of years. And financially for him, that might be still better than whatever he's earning playing rugby. So, but I think there's a very good chance 3 years from now we see Rees-Zamit playing rugby again.
Now, Eddie, I want to bring something and get your opinion on it. I hate to discuss the Live Golf Tour, so this is Live adjacent. And this is with someone that I think you genuinely respect and what your opinion is, and that's Rafael Nadal, who now is going to be the ambassador for the Saudi Tennis Federation. So he is going to have a new role, which includes promoting tennis in Saudi Arabia, and plans to have a Rafa Nadal Academy there. And this obviously is just another step in the Saudis just kind of getting their hands into every major sport to eventually kind of control and run the sport. And how do you feel about Nadal being the one to do this?
I don't love it. I think ultimately, right, look, go and make your money. I mean, I don't think Rafael Nadal needs money. He should have already made more than enough money by now to be set for his lifetime, his children's lifetime, his grandchildren's lifetime. And that's without factoring in he has plenty of channels through which he can continue to make money for the rest of his life. But definitely, if you're telling me offers were on the table were equal, he could either have an academy in Spain or an academy in Saudi Arabia. He's not choosing Saudi Arabia, right? So money is definitely the determining factor. It's a country that has basically no history within the sport. I mean, yes, tournaments get played there, but it's not as if we've seen, consistently professional tennis players coming out of Saudi Arabia or even in the Middle East. I don't know exactly how popular tennis is as a sport among young people in the Middle East, aside from within the sort of ultra wealthy groups. And so, yeah, I'm sure he'll say he wants to grow the sport, and then, Spain doesn't need another person there teaching tennis, but maybe Saudi Arabia does. I can't help but be cynical, and it's a shame. Like, it's a shame when people don't really need the money to be thinking that they're not considering exactly where the money is coming from or the other things that they are tacitly endorsing through the decision to be a kind of ambassador for that country. Yeah, it bothers me. If I were, it doesn't surprise me, really, because ultimately all of these players are just guns for hire, right? But yeah, I think it's not a decision you can be proud of, put it that way. I think that's the thing that would be a shame. As someone who's achieved so much throughout his life and his career, so many things to be incredibly proud of, I don't think this would make the list of things I'm so proud I've done in my first, 36-year-old, 37-year-old.
Yeah. And it's slightly frustrating that all of the people who are doing this will try and hide behind the spin of, I'm just trying to promote the sport that I love to a place that hasn't had the level of exposure to this sport. And I just want to really grow the sport. And it's like, you can do that and not take $150 million from the Saudis to do that. I mean, one, there are a lot of other places besides Saudi Arabia that you can grow the sport. But two, if you're really that invested in it, then you could do that without the money.
Yeah, both are true, and you could probably get money from Saudi Arabia, even potentially to do it elsewhere. You know, if Nadal was so committed to the idea of growing tennis or giving something back, or really doing something with grassroots tennis in developing countries or places where tennis is not as big of a sport as it could be, I'm sure there'd be plenty of people willing to invest in that. And you're right, there are better places to go. You could go to places in South America that definitely have a passion for tennis but don't have the facilities or the means to develop great tennis players. You could go to Asia, where again there's definitely a larger tennis heritage. You could go to Africa, a country that as of yet really ignored from a tennis perspective, a country that basically doesn't have very many professional tennis tournaments, where the tennis world basically completely overlooks, both in terms of players being developed and them visiting. That would be the place you could make the strongest argument for any of these tennis players. If your focus is on growing the sport, there are places out there where you could do it really efficiently and where there'd be a lot of sense for why you chose that location. Saudi Arabia is not that. And I can't help, if I want to even be more cynical, right? There's three types of people who are going to be involved then in the Nadal Academy. It's going to be prospects that they're handpicking from around the world, who they're then flying into Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia will love, because probably at some moment in time, those players will represent Saudi Arabia, even though they were born in Spain or born in Brazil or born wherever. So they'll end up, Saudi will sort of start to have a tennis culture. There'll be ultra wealthy kids whose parents are just paying for them to be in the Rafael Nadal Academy. Complete waste of time from his perspective in terms of developing the game of tennis. And then probably a handful of sort of local kids who they give, some kind of little sponsorship deal to try and, so they can, make the numbers look better, of like, no,
Bump
look,
the PR campaign.
Yeah, we took some kids from underprivileged areas in Saudi Arabia and we, gave them tennis rackets and tennis shoes. So,
oh yeah, but who's that kid coming in the Rolls Royce over there? Don't worry about that kid.
yeah, and how many laborers died building the academy? Like
too far, Eddie. Too far.
No, it's not too far though. It's a shame. It's a shame, but not surprising, but a shame. And I guess we can do a quick catch up on European football very briefly. Obviously, we spoke about maybe the standout game of the weekend in the Premier League was Newcastle against Manchester City. It didn't disappoint. It delivered 5 very good goals, an exciting match in which City took the lead, Newcastle went 2-1 up, City equalized and then scored a 91st minute winner. The quality of all of the goals was really outstanding.
I think that the main talking point has to be Kevin De Bruyne and
Kevin De Bruyne came on,
instant impact that he makes.
Came on, scored a nice goal, and then also a great assist. I mean, Otto Bob also deserves some credit. Really nice touch to control the ball and the composure he showed to score that winning goal. But I mean, that team with De Bruyne back, and you just look at the way they controlled that match. I know, it's easy to take away from that and think, well, Newcastle are missing a lot of players, and on another, they were 2-1 up with not that long to go, and certainly maybe they should have deserved the draw, being 2-2 going into injury time. But the reality is they scored 2 very good goals against the run of play, back within minutes of each other. The second half did absolutely. I mean, I don't know if they really got into the City half at all. I think the possession statistic, they had, I think, 27% possession over the course of the match. Second half, they must have had 15% possession. I mean, the only time they had the ball was basically a goal kick. Aside from that, they never really had it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's, yes, they're suffering from injuries, and they're not in a position to address that because of the financial fair play. It's come out that they cannot sign players either unless they want the sort of fines that are being handed out to teams to also find their way to St. James's Park. But City look kind of unstoppable now as far as winning the Premier League is concerned. I mean, it feels like a foregone conclusion at this point.
I guess the other big matchup you had, big in terms of, players and teams and not necessarily standings, was Spurs Manchester United, that ended in a 2-2 draw. So another 4 goals.
Yeah, and in a sense, we got to see what it kind of confirmed what we thought of both of those teams going into it. I mean, Spurs are definitely missing their best players, and probably had they had a full strength team, would have won that. But we saw, Spurs, who very good at attacking but can concede goals, and also really committed to going forward. They kind of bossed that game in the second half. And then United, who, I don't know, you kind of walk away from it not being super impressed, but then at the end of the day, that's, a point against Spurs, which isn't the worst result in the world. So, they're kind of having this strangely decent season without being particularly good.
I don't know if I'd call sitting 7th in the table decent.
Yeah, but I mean, when you really think about it, right? Like, best case scenario for them this season was 4th, probably. If you were doing a honest, unbiased prediction. And so they're not that far off there. They're not, the season isn't as bad as sometimes people want to make it look out. I think that the thing that makes it look bad is that I don't see how it really radically improves. They're not like, it doesn't feel, whereas with Spurs, it feels like they are building something. Like, you can see things are in place that if they get more time to bring new players in, they can build the right squad. You see a vision. I don't see a vision with Manchester United. I just see as if they're trying to do okay. People are trying to keep their jobs.
Crazy to think we're already in the back half of the season for the Premier League.
Yeah, that was the halfway mark, basically, of the season.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's not too long to go. And as I said, it looks like another title win for City, really. All right, I guess that pretty much wraps up sport. Maybe we'll probably talk a little bit more tennis over the next couple of weeks with the Australian Open being underway, but any non-sporting events to talk about?
No, I think we can save. I've been watching some shows that are average at best that we can discuss when we have some more time on the next podcast, maybe as we preview the divisional round of the NFL playoffs.
Sounds good.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
See you.